Time to replace the legacy code with something more profitable, Parker Mitchell announced, his lips curling into that self-satisfied smirk he'd probably rehearsed while gargling imported mineral water and scrolling through his investment portfolio. Innovation waits for no one, especially not outdated programming methods. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The conference room froze like someone had hit pause on reality. No movement, no whispers, just the quiet hum of the ventilation system and 30 pairs of eyes witnessing the public execution of a career. Mira Chen sat motionless, her spine straight as graphite, hands folded neatly on her custom mechanical keyboard. The rest of the engineering department found sudden interest in their laptop screens, desperately avoiding eye contact with either Mira or Parker. Nobody wanted to be collateral damage in whatever corporate bloodbath was unfolding. Quantum Nexus is entering a new era, Parker continued, pacing across the front of the room like a Silicon Valley evangelist high on his own supply. We need forward-thinking algorithms, not clunky code written by people who remember dial-up internet. Effective immediately, Mira Chen is no longer leading our AI division. No applause, just the collective sound of 30 people holding their breath. Dev team lead Rishi stared straight ahead, jaw twitching like he wanted to speak but remembered what happened to the last engineer who challenged Parker, reassigned to documenting legacy code for the customer service chatbot. Sasha from legal suddenly developed an intense fascination with her cold coffee. Mira didn't gasp. She didn't stand up and demand justice. She didn't deliver the shocked, "How could you?" speech that Parker clearly expected from this public humiliation. Instead, she blinked slowly, almost sympathetically, like she was watching a child proudly announce they'd deleted all the family photos to make room for a new game. Parker cleared his throat, visibly thrown by her composure. "Security will escort you out following this meeting. Your access will be revoked by end of day." Mira glanced at her phone, thumb swiping the screen without emotion. A notification popped up, visible to anyone looking in her direction. Meeting, Neurotech Final Acquisition Review, 2:30 p.m. Attendees, Jay Wang, CEO, S. Kapoor, CTO, M. Chen. Algorithm Architect. Status, confirmed. For just a moment, something in Myra's eyes flickered, not fear, not embarrassment, but something cooler, more calculated. The kind of calm a chess grandmaster exhibits right before announcing checkmate. She stood slowly, deliberately, gathering her belongings with methodical precision. Not a single item out of place, her company ID still clipped to her blazer, not one hair in her sleek ponytail disturbed. "May I collect my personal items?" she asked quietly. Parker blinked, clearly thrown off his script. "Yes, of course. Someone from security will, no need. I'm perfectly capable," she replied, her voice level. Her heels tapped against the polished concrete floors like a metronome counting down everyone else's professional guilt. When she reached the door, she paused for just a moment, turning slightly to catch Parker in her peripheral vision. "You should really check who owns the intellectual property rights before making these little power plays," she said softly. Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a slam would have. The moment she left, the room exhaled collectively, shallow, nervous breaths. No one spoke, but everyone was thinking the same thing: what just happened? Parker, looking more confused than victorious, mumbled something about moving forward with our vision and clicked to the next slide, but the meeting was effectively dead. Myra's absence had created a void that his recycled business jargon couldn't fill. Out in the hallway, Mira paused only once, just long enough to check her phone again. 12:45 p.m. Plenty of time to clear her desk before her meeting with Neurotech. They would be waiting, and they definitely wouldn't be asking for Parker Mitchell. The elevator descended like a countdown timer, each floor number flashing by bringing her closer to the end of one chapter and the beginning of something else. When it reached the lobby, Mira stepped out into the sterile, over-designed space with its fake plants and motivational quotes etched into glass walls. All that transparent corporate positivity couldn't mask the scent of ambition gone toxic. Her box was small, one framed photo of her grandmother, a ceramic mug with quantum equations, and a single external hard drive containing exactly one file, the original algorithm she'd developed before Quantum Nexus hired her. The algorithm that Parker had just effectively fired, not knowing she had never fully integrated it into the company's systems. She didn't linger, didn't give the security cameras the satisfaction of capturing a moment of weakness. Her steps were measured and confident, like someone walking into a negotiation, not away from a firing. At 2:25 p.m., right on schedule, two figures entered the lobby, one woman in a crisp charcoal suit, the other a man with wire-rimmed glasses and the quiet confidence of someone who controlled serious capital. No forced smiles, no casual pleasantries. Just the focused energy of people who valued precision over personality. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The receptionist, a recent hire with trendy glasses and a culture champion pin on her lanyard, froze mid-scroll through her social media feed. Parker was already striding across the lobby, of course he was, chest puffed out like a startup founder who'd just secured series of funding. Welcome to Quantum Nexus. Parker's voice bounced off the minimalist concrete walls, too loud, too practiced. Parker Mitchell, Chief Innovation Officer. We're thrilled to have, where is Mira Chen, the woman in the charcoal suit interrupted. Her voice as sharp as her tailoring. Parker's smile faltered but didn't completely collapse. Yes. Mira. Unfortunately, she's recently transitioned out of the company. But no worries, I've been fully briefed on the algorithm acquisition and, the man with wire-rimmed glasses turned to the receptionist. Is Mira Chen still in the building? Before the flustered receptionist could answer, Mira stepped forward. From where she'd been waiting quietly by the security desk, her box tucked under one arm. I'm here, she said, her voice calm as still water. They're here for me. Parker turned like an actor realizing he was in the wrong scene. Mira, let's not create a scene. I can handle, this isn't a scene, she replied. This is business. You'd know that if you read anything besides TechCrunch in your own press releases. The woman in the charcoal suit stepped beside Mira. Miss Chen, if you're ready? I am. They didn't wait, flanking her like executive protection as they walked toward the exit. Parker followed, his Italian loafers slapping against the polished concrete like angry exclamation points. Hold on, he sputtered. She's not an employee anymore. She can't represent Quantum Nexus in any. From inside her blazer, Mira produced a slim document and held it out without looking back. I'm not representing Quantum Nexus. I'm representing myself and my algorithm, Neurosphere. The one I developed before joining this company, the one I specifically excluded from my employment agreement. Page 42, Appendix C, excluded prior intellectual property. Parker snatched the document, his eyes scanning frantically. You can't, Neurotech is acquiring my algorithm, Mira continued, finally turning to face him. Not Quantum Nexus's version. My original algorithm. The one you just inadvertently released me to sell when you terminated my employment without proper intellectual property transfer. The woman in the charcoal suit, Neurotech's chief legal officer, allowed her lips to curve slightly. We've been trying to acquire Neurosphere for months. Ms. Chen was admirably loyal to Quantum Nexus, despite our increasingly generous offers. Today's development has simplified things considerably. Parker's face drained of color, leaving him the same shade as the lobby's minimalist furniture. You can't do this. Our legal team should read the employment contracts they draft, finished the man with wire-rimmed glasses, Neurotech's CEO. Particularly the clauses about intellectual property retention. The glass doors slid open before them, and for the first time since her public firing, Mira allowed herself the smallest smile, not vindictive, not yet, just the quiet acknowledgement that sometimes justice arrives wearing business casual. As they stepped outside into the California sunshine, the Neurotech CEO glanced at Mira. Our offer still stands at $8 million. Given today's circumstances, however, we might need to revisit the terms. Mira nodded. I think that would be appropriate. Back inside, Parker was already stabbing at his phone, barking orders at someone to get legal on the line immediately. His voice echoed through the lobby, but nobody was listening anymore. The receptionist was already updating her resume, having witnessed exactly how Quantum Nexus treated its most valuable talent. By the time Mira slid into the back seat of the waiting Tesla, social media was already buzzing with whispers. Engineering channels lit up with cryptic messages. Did you hear about QN? Chen just walked with Neurotech. Mitchell messed up big time. The Neurotech legal team didn't waste time. Within hours, they had drafted a term sheet that made Mira's eyes widen slightly, the only visible reaction she'd allowed herself all day. $10 million, said the CLO, plus royalties on implementation. We want exclusive rights, and we want you to lead the integration team. Mira studied the document, her mind calculating probabilities faster than most people processed simple addition. The royalty structure needs adjustment. And I want autonomy over the development roadmap. The CEO nodded. Done. As the Tesla glided through Silicon Valley traffic, Mira gazed out at the passing tech campuses, glass monuments to innovation, disruption, and occasionally, catastrophic misjudgment. Her phone buzzed with messages from former colleagues, their tones ranging from concerned to conspiratorial. She answered none of them. Instead, she opened her laptop and pulled up the original Neurosphere code, elegant, efficient, revolutionary in its approach to machine learning. The algorithm she'd built in her apartment 3 years ago, fueled by instant ramen and mathematical inspiration. The algorithm that Parker Mitchell had just accidentally set free, along with its creator. By sunset, news of the acquisition had reached the Quantum Nexus board. Emergency meetings were called. Outside counsel was summoned. Someone in legal was going through Parker's email history with forensic precision. Mira didn't care. She was sitting in Neuroteca's headquarters, watching as their technical team reverently reviewed her work, asking thoughtful questions that Parker would never have understood. For the first time in years, she felt her work was truly valued, not just for the profit it could generate, but for the innovation it represented. Her phone rang again. Quantum Nexus's number. She declined the call. The next morning, she woke in her apartment to find her email inbox overflowing. Former colleagues offering congratulations or seeking referrals. Tech blogs requesting comments. Recruiters suddenly discovering her unique talent profile. And there, buried among them, a message from Quantum Nexus's board chair: urgent discussion needed regarding your departure and intellectual property rights. Available to meet at your earliest convenience. Mira sipped her coffee and deleted it without replying. At Neuroteca's offices, she was given a corner workspace with a view of the mountains. No ostentatious title, no glass-walled fishbowl, just respect and resources. The integration team gathered around as she sketched out the architecture of Neurosphere, explaining the intuitive leaps that made it different from conventional machine learning algorithms. The key isn't just processing power, she explained, drawing a complex diagram that somehow made perfect sense when her hands were done with it. It's about mirroring how human intuition works alongside logical processing. Most algorithms choose efficiency over creativity. Neurosphere balances both. The team watched, mesmerized. This wasn't just code, this was artistry. Back at Quantum Nexus, chaos was blooming like algae in a stagnant pond. Their stock had dropped 7% on rumors of the lost algorithm. Parker was in back-to-back meetings with increasingly unhappy executives. The dev team, suddenly rudderless. Without Mira's guidance, couldn't make sense of the half-implemented systems she'd left behind. Rishi, the dev team lead who'd watched Mira's firing in silence, finally spoke up during a crisis management meeting. We can't replicate her work. The documentation covers the implementation, but not the underlying architecture. That was all in her head. Parker slammed his hand on the table. It can't be that complicated. Just reverse engineer what we have and reverse engineer intuition. Rishi laughed humorlessly. You fired the only person who understood how the pieces fit together. Now you want us to guess? By afternoon, Quantum Nexus's damage control was in full swing. Their PR team crafted a statement about amicable separation and mutual decision to pursue different directions in AI development. Nobody believed it, especially after tech blog Vergepoint published an article titled Quantum Blunder: How Quantum Nexus Lost Their AI Crown Jewel and the Genius Behind It. Mira saw the article but didn't comment. She was too busy negotiating the final terms of her contract with Neurotech, the royalty structure, development timeline, and most importantly, her creative control. We want you to build a team, the CTO told her. Your people, your methods. She thought of the talented engineers still trapped at Quantum Nexus under Parker's regime. I know exactly who to call. That evening, as Mira walked to her car in Neuroteca's parking garage, her phone rang again. Quantum Nexus, but not the main number, Parker's direct line. After a moment's hesitation, she answered. Mira. His voice sounded different, strained, desperate. We need to talk. I'm listening, she replied, her voice neutral. The board wants to make this right. Whatever Neurotech is offering, we'll match it. Plus your old position back, reporting directly to the CEO. No more misunderstandings. She leaned against her car, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Parker. It was arrogance. You thought I was replaceable. I made a mistake, he admitted, the words clearly painful for him. But this isn't just about you and me. The company is not my concern anymore, she finished. My algorithm was never fully integrated into your systems. I told you that multiple times, but you were too busy planning your next restructuring to listen. Silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of consequence. 10 million, he finally said. That's what they're offering, right? We'll do 12. Mira smiled, though he couldn't see it. It's not about the money, Parker. It's about respect. You can't buy that after the fact. She ended the call and drove home, the weight of the day finally settling on her shoulders. Not depression, not anger, just the calm certainty that comes from watching carefully laid plans unfold exactly as designed. Because what Parker never understood, what Quantum Nexus failed to realize until it was too late, was that Mira Chen had never been careless with her creation. Every line of code, every algorithm pathway had been carefully documented, just not in Quantum Nexus's systems. The implementation they had was a shadow of the true innovation. Neurosphere wasn't just an algorithm, it was Mira's legacy. And she had protected it from the beginning, knowing that in the cutthroat world of tech, loyalty was often a one-way street. The contract with Neurotech was signed the next morning, $10 million, plus royalties, plus creative control. Not just money, but vindication. Not just a job, but a partnership. As Mira signed her name with steady strokes, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The late nights coding while others networked at industry parties. The careful documentation of her intellectual property that lawyers had called unnecessarily paranoid. The quiet confidence that had allowed her to sit calmly while being publicly humiliated, knowing what would follow. "Congratulations," said Neurotech's CEO, shaking her hand firmly. "Welcome to the team." "Not just a team member," corrected the CLO with a rare smile. "A partner." "Partner. Not employee, not resource, not replaceable cog in a corporate machine. Partner." Mira's phone buzzed with a news alert. Quantum Nexus's stock had dropped another 5%. A second alert followed immediately. Parker Mitchell had been placed on administrative leave pending a review of recent management decisions. She put her phone away without comment. Justice didn't need her attention to unfold, it was already in motion, precise as mathematics, inevitable as gravity. Back at Quantum Nexus, the board was in emergency session. Revenue projections were being hastily revised downward. Investors were demanding explanations. And through it all, the absence of one person, of one algorithm, created a void that seemed to grow by the hour. Meanwhile, Mira Chen stepped into her new office at Neurotech, set down her small box of belongings, and opened her laptop. The original Neurosphere code glowed on the screen, elegant and complete. She had been building this moment for years, not the revenge, not the money, but the freedom to create on her own terms. She began to type, adding new lines to her algorithm, expanding its potential in ways she'd only dreamed of before. This wasn't an ending. It was barely even the beginning. The next morning, Mira's signature on the Neurotech contract wasn't even dry when social media erupted with speculation. Someone from Quantum Nexus's legal department had leaked details to a tech reporter, and now Neurosphere was trending alongside hashtags like #QuantumFail and #AlgorithmHeist. "Can you believe this?" Jayla asked, sliding a tablet across the conference table in Neurotech's strategy room. Mira glanced at the headline, "Quantum Nexus stock plummets as AI Wunderkind walks with proprietary algorithm." She pushed the tablet back without comment and returned to reviewing the integration timeline. "Aren't you even a little satisfied?" Jayla pressed, leaning forward. As Neurotech's marketing director, she clearly saw the PR goldmine in Mira's story. "They humiliated you publicly, and now they're imploding." "I'm focused on what's next, not what's behind me," Mira replied, though a small part of her, the part that had sat motionless through Parker's public execution of her career, felt something that wasn't quite satisfaction but wasn't quite regret either. Meanwhile, back at Quantum Nexus, the morning executive briefing had turned into a funeral for corporate competence. The CTO, a veteran engineer who'd been sidelined by Parker's aggressive innovation agenda, displayed a series of graphs that told a story of imminent catastrophe. "Our AI platform is essentially non-functional," he explained, pointing to a jagged downward trend. "Without Neurosphere's core architecture, the applications we've built are just empty shells. They look impressive in demos, but they can't actually learn or adapt." The board chair, a silver-haired venture capitalist who'd survived 3 tech bubbles, removed his glasses slowly. "And our options are limited," the CTO admitted. "We could try to reverse engineer what we have, but that would take months, maybe years. We could acquire another algorithm, but nothing on the market compares to what we lost. Or we could try to bring Mira back." From the corner of the room, Quantum's general counsel cleared her throat. "About that last option. We've received a cease and desist from Neurotech's legal team regarding any direct contact with Ms. Chen. Apparently, Mr. Mitchell made several calls to her personal number last night that they're characterizing as harassment and attempted corporate espionage." All eyes turned to Parker, who sat slumped in his chair like a deflating bouncy castle. He hadn't even bothered to gel his hair that morning. "I was trying to salvage the situation," he muttered. "Someone had to do something." "Yes," the board chair agreed coldly. "Someone should have done something before you fired our most valuable asset without consulting anyone or reviewing her employment contract." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Parker, the chair continued, I think it's time. You stepped out while we discuss next steps. Not fired, not yet, but the writing was on the wall in neon letters. Parker gathered his things, dropping his premium fountain pen twice before making it to the door. No one watched him leave. As the door closed behind him, the CFO spoke up. Just to put numbers on this disaster, our latest projections show a 40% revenue shortfall for the quarter if we can't get a working demo to Axiom partners by the end of the month. They were counting on our AI solution for their medical diagnostics platform. Can't we just use what we have? Asked a newer board member, a former hedge fund manager who'd been brought in for his financial acumen rather than technical knowledge. The CTO laughed without humor. What we have is a beautiful interface wrapped around a hollow core. It's like having the world's most expensive sports car with no engine. Looks great in the showroom, won't get you out of the parking lot. Across town at Neurotech, Mira was conducting a very different kind of meeting. Surrounded by engineers who looked at her with a mixture of awe and nervous anticipation, she was mapping out Neurosphere's architecture on a digital whiteboard. The breakthrough isn't in the processing power, she explained, drawing a series of interconnected nodes. It's in how the algorithm makes intuitive leaps between seemingly unrelated data points, similar to human creativity but with computational precision. A young engineer raised her hand tentatively. Is it true you developed this in your apartment using just a single workstation? Mira nodded. The core concept, yes. I didn't have access to enterprise-level computing power then, so I had to make the architecture incredibly efficient. That constraint actually ended up being the key to its success. The room buzzed with excited murmurs. This wasn't just another acquisition, this was witnessing history. At the back of the room, Sanjay Kapoor, Neurotech's CTO, watched with quiet satisfaction. He'd been trying to recruit Mira for years, ever since he'd seen her present a paper at a machine learning conference. Now she was here, bringing with her the algorithm that would potentially transform Neurotech from a respectable mid-tier player into a dominant force in AI. After the meeting, he caught up with her in the hallway. The team is impressed. I haven't seen them this energized in months. They're talented, Mira acknowledged. I just hope they're not expecting miracles from me. No miracles, Sanjay assured her. Just revolutionary, industry-disrupting innovation. His eyes crinkled with humor. No pressure. For the first time in days, Mira laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that echoed down the corridor. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Rishi, her former team lead at Quantum Nexus. It's chaos here. Parker's on thin ice. Team misses you. Also, they're trying to reverse engineer your code and failing spectacularly. She didn't reply immediately. Loyalty to her former team pulled at her, but they had sat silently during her humiliation. Not out of malice, she knew, but out of the same fear that kept so many talented people trapped in toxic environments. Fear of being next. By lunchtime, news of Quantum Nexus's predicament had spread through Silicon Valley's nervous system of gossip channels and insider forums. Their stock had dropped another 3 points. A previously scheduled keynote address by Parker at a tech conference was mysteriously cancelled. Recruiters were circling their engineering department like hawks spotting wounded prey. Mira sat alone in Neurotech's sunny atrium, picking at a salad and scrolling through the industry chatter on her phone. She wasn't celebrating Quantum's downfall. There were good people there who didn't deserve the fallout from Parker's arrogance, but she couldn't deny a certain cosmic justice in watching a house of cards collapse after its builder had discarded its foundation. Mind if I join you? She looked up to find Julia Wang, Neurotech's CEO, standing by her table with a bowl of soup and an expression of genuine interest. Please, Mira gestured to the empty chair. Julia sat with the effortless grace of someone completely comfortable in her own authority. Unlike Parker, who wielded power like a club, Julia carried it like a well-balanced tool, useful but not showy. How's the integration planning going? She asked, stirring her soup thoughtfully. On schedule, Mira replied. Your team is catching on quickly. Julia nodded. They're sharp. But they also know a good thing when they see it. Your algorithm is remarkable, Mira. I've seen the preliminary benchmarks. Mira felt a flush of pride that had nothing to do with validation and everything to do with recognition. Not of her as a person, but of her work, the countless hours she'd poured into Neurosphere, the elegant solutions she'd crafted when easier paths would have sufficed. I have to ask, Julia continued, her voice dropping slightly. Quantum Nexus is imploding. Their legal team has reached out 3 times this morning alone, trying to negotiate some kind of licensing arrangement. They're desperate. And? Mira kept her voice neutral. And nothing. We have exclusive rights now. I'm just curious how you feel about it all. Mira considered the question, not as a test but as a genuine inquiry. I don't take pleasure in their struggle. But I also don't regret protecting my work. Julia studied her for a moment, then smiled. Good answer. Revenge is a waste of energy better spent on creation. Speaking of which, she slid a folder across the table. The board approved your request for a dedicated research division. You'll have autonomy, resources, and first pick of talent. The folder contained a detailed proposal for Neurosphere Labs, with Mira listed as chief scientist and founding director. The budget figures made her eyes widen slightly. This is generous. It's strategic, Julia corrected. We didn't just buy an algorithm, Mira. We invested in your vision. I want to see what you'll create next when you're not constrained by short-sighted leadership. The conversation shifted to technical challenges and market opportunities, but Mira's mind kept returning to that word, vision. At Quantum Nexus, vision had been Parker's domain, a buzzword he'd wielded in meetings while sidelining the actual innovation happening under his nose. Here, it was being handed back to her, not as a corporate talking point but as a genuine mandate to create. After lunch, Mira returned to her temporary office to find an email from an unfamiliar address, Alan Torres at Quantum Nexus. The subject line read simply, Board request for direct communication. Her finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won out. She opened it. Ms. Chen, as chairman of Quantum Nexus's board of directors, I'm reaching out to request a confidential conversation regarding the current situation. While I understand your decision to take your intellectual property elsewhere, I believe there may be an opportunity for a mutually beneficial resolution that could prevent significant disruption to the industry ecosystem we both value. I can make myself available at your convenience. Respectfully, Alan Torres, no threats, no desperate pleas, no Parker-style manipulation. Just a straightforward acknowledgement of reality and a subtle appeal to her sense of professional responsibility. Clever. She closed the email without replying, but she didn't delete it either. The afternoon brought a flurry of activity as Mira began mapping out the technical requirements for fully integrating Neurosphere into Neuroteca's existing systems. Unlike at Quantum Nexus, where she'd been careful to keep the core architecture separate, here she was embedding her creation fully into its new home. We'll need to refactor the learning modules to handle the increased data throughput, she explained to Sanjay and the engineering leads. And the neural pathways will need recalibration for your specific use cases. How long? Sanjay asked. 2 weeks for the basic integration. Another month to optimize. After that, you'll start seeing exponential improvements in performance as the algorithm learns your systems. The timeline was aggressive but achievable. Mira had always worked best under pressure, not the toxic pressure of Parker's arbitrary deadlines, but the healthy challenge of technical problems worth solving. As the meeting wrapped up, Sanjay held back while the others filed out. There's something you should know, he said once they were alone. Quantum Nexus is calling every AI engineer in the valley, offering obscene signing bonuses to anyone who can help them rebuild what they lost. They're specifically targeting people who've worked with you. Mira absorbed this with a small nod. They won't succeed. Not because the engineers aren't capable, but because they're trying to replicate an endpoint without understanding the journey. Neurosphere works the way it does because of thousands of small decisions I made along the way. Most of them undocumented. Like trying to bake a cake by only looking at the finished product, Sanjay suggested. Exactly. They might create something that looks similar, but it won't have the same essence. The word felt strange in a technical conversation, but it was accurate. Algorithms, at their highest levels, weren't just code. They were expressions of their creators' understanding of the world, translated into mathematics and logic. By evening, Mira was exhausted but exhilarated. For the first time since her public firing, she felt fully engaged with her work rather than distracted by corporate politics. As she packed up her laptop, her phone rang with an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. Mira Chen. The voice was unfamiliar but carried the unmistakable tone of media. Eliza Wynn. From Tech Revolution. I'm working on a feature about your situation with Quantum Nexus, and I was hoping to get your perspective on. No comment, Mira interrupted, already reaching to end the call. Wait. We're not looking for gossip. This is about the bigger picture, how tech companies treat their innovators, how intellectual property is protected or exploited. Your story could help others protect their work. Mira paused, finger hovering over the red button. The reporter continued quickly, sensing the window of opportunity. We've already spoken with 3 other developers who lost control of their innovations. This isn't just about you and Quantum Nexus, it's a systemic issue in the industry. Something in the woman's voice, earnestness, perhaps, or genuine conviction, made Mira reconsider. I'm not interested in a hit piece on my former employer. That's not what we're doing, Eliza assured her. This is about examining the power dynamics in tech innovation and giving developers the information they need to protect themselves. Mira thought about all the brilliant minds she'd seen exploited over the years, creative forces treated as replaceable resources by people who couldn't code their way out of a text editor. People like Parker, who built careers claiming credit for others' brilliance. Send me your questions, she finally said. I'll consider responding to specific topics about intellectual property protection. Nothing personal, nothing vindictive. That's all I'm asking, the reporter replied, clearly pleased. And for what it's worth, what happened to you is wrong. But what you did next was inspiring. After ending the call, Mira sat in her darkened office, considering those words. Inspiring. She hadn't set out to be an example or a cautionary tale. She'd simply protected what was hers, what she'd created through countless hours of work and flashes of genuine insight. But maybe there was value in others seeing that it was possible to stand up, to walk away, to thrive after public humiliation. To transform a moment of professional crisis into opportunity. Her phone buzzed with a text from Julia. Dinner? There's someone I'd like you to meet. A potential first hire for your new division. The day wasn't over yet. In fact, it felt increasingly like something was just beginning. Across town, the lights still burned in Quantum Nexus's executive suite. The board meeting had stretched into its fifth hour, with legal advisors and crisis management consultants cycling through like visiting specialists at a patient's bedside. The situation is untenable, the lead counsel was explaining. We've explored every angle. Without Ms. Chen's cooperation or the original algorithm, we have no product to deliver to Axiom partners. The penalty clauses in that contract alone will cost us upwards of $20 million. The board chair, Alan Torres, rubbed his temples. And our options? Limited, the lawyer admitted. We can try to rebuild from scratch, which our technical team estimates would take 9 to 12 months. We can attempt to acquire a comparable algorithm, though our market analysis suggests nothing currently available matches Neurosphere's capabilities. Or we can make one final approach to Ms. Chen, through proper channels this time. She's not answering our calls, someone pointed out. No, Alan agreed. But she hasn't entirely closed the door either. She read my email, we received a tracking confirmation, but didn't respond. That tells me she's at least considering communication. What can we possibly offer her now? Asked the CFO. Neurotech gave her $10 million and creative control. We can't match that in our current position. Alan stared at the financial projections displayed on the wall screen. Red arrows pointed downward across every metric. Maybe we're thinking about this wrong. Maybe it's not about what we can offer her, but what she might want from us. Besides our complete humiliation, someone muttered. Professional vindication, Alan suggested. Public acknowledgement of her contribution. And Parker Mitchell's. Head on a platter. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Are we seriously considering firing our CIO to appease a former employee? The CFO finally asked. I'm considering saving this company, Alan replied evenly. And if that means acknowledging we made a catastrophic error in judgment by allowing Parker to drive away our most valuable asset, then yes, that's exactly what I'm proposing. No one spoke for several long moments. Then, slowly, heads began to nod around the table. Draft the press release, Alan instructed the communications director. And someone find Parker. It's time he understood the full consequences of his actions. In a quiet restaurant across town, Mira sat across from Julia Wong and a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who had introduced herself simply as Dr. Chandra. Before I was Neurotech's chief innovation advisor, I spent 20 years at MIT developing learning algorithms, Dr. Chandra explained, swirling a glass of red wine thoughtfully. I've reviewed your work, Mira. It's exceptional. Thank you, Mira replied, genuinely flattered. Dr. Chandra's reputation in AI circles was legendary. But I'm more interested in where you're going next. Julia tells me you've been given carte blanche to build something new. Mira glanced at Julia, who nodded encouragingly. I've been thinking about applications beyond traditional machine learning, Mira began cautiously. Ways to apply Neurosphere's intuitive capabilities to problems that have stymied conventional approaches. Such as? Dr. Chandra leaned forward, interest sparking in her eyes. Climate modeling. Medical research. Creative problem solving in fields where the variables are too complex for standard algorithms to process effectively. Dr. Chandra smiled for the first time. Ambitious. Challenging. Potentially world-changing. She set down her glass with a decisive click. I'd like to join your team. Mira blinked in surprise. You would? Intelligence recognizes intelligence, Ms. Chen. And opportunity recognizes opportunity. What you've built is remarkable. What you could build next, with the right support, could be revolutionary. As the conversation flowed into technical possibilities and research directions, Mira felt a strange sense of dislocation. Just 2 days ago, she had been sitting in a conference room being publicly fired by a man who understood neither her work nor her worth. Now she was discussing changing the world with one of the foremost minds in artificial intelligence. The universe, it seemed, had a remarkable way of redistributing talent to where it belonged. By the time dessert arrived, Mira had not only secured Dr. Chandra as her first hire but had outlined the beginnings of a research agenda that made even Julia, who generally maintained CEO-appropriate composure, visibly excited. To new beginnings. Julia raised her glass in a toast. And to algorithms finding their proper homes, added Dr. Chandra with a knowing smile. Mira raised her glass, feeling for the first time not just vindication but genuine excitement for the future. Parker Mitchell had done more than fire her. He had inadvertently launched her toward a destiny far greater than anything possible within Quantum Nexus's limited vision. Her phone buzzed one final time that evening. A news alert, breaking, Quantum Nexus announces leadership restructuring. CIO Parker Mitchell steps down effective immediately. Mira turned off her phone and rejoined the conversation about the future, her future, already in progress. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Neuroteca's new research wing, casting long rectangles of gold across the polished concrete floors. Mira stood in the center of what would soon be the Neurosphere lab, surveying the empty space with quiet satisfaction. 3 weeks had passed since her public firing and subsequent $10 million vindication. Now she was building something entirely her own. What do you think? Asked Julia, Neuroteca's CEO, gesturing to the expansive space. We can configure it however you want. Just say the word. Mira walked the perimeter slowly, her mind already mapping out workstations, collaboration areas, the specialized computing infrastructure her team would need. It's perfect, she said finally. When can we start moving in? Next week. The contractors are finishing up the secure server room today. Speaking of which, Julia handed Mira a small metal case. Your new security credentials. Full autonomy, highest clearance level. Even I'll need your permission to access certain areas. Mira accepted the case, feeling its weight, literal and metaphorical. At Quantum Nexus, she'd fought for every resource, every permission, every scrap of authority over her own creation. Here, it was being handed to her without question. Thank you, she said simply. Julia smiled. Don't thank me. This is purely self-interest. What you're building is going to transform this company. As they walked back to the main building, Mira's phone buzzed with a news alert. She glanced down to see Quantum Nexus's logo beside the headline, Quantum Nexus stock falls 15% after failed product demo. Analysts question company's future. Julia caught the flicker of expression on Mira's face. Still following their death spiral? Professional curiosity, Mira replied, slipping the phone back into her pocket. Mira. Julia stopped walking, turning to face her directly. You don't owe them anything, not your attention, not your concern, and certainly not your guilt. They made their choice when they discarded you. Mira nodded, though a part of her still felt an uncomfortable twinge at the thought of her former colleagues struggling through the wreckage Parker had created. I know. It's just, there are good people there. Good people who sat silently while you were publicly humiliated, Julia pointed out. Look forward, not back. Your team is waiting. The team Julia referred to was assembled in Neuroteca's main conference room, 6 brilliant minds handpicked by Mira from a flood of applicants drawn by rumors of the revolutionary work happening under her leadership. Dr. Chandra sat at the head of the table, already commanding respect despite her recent arrival. Beside her was Leo Kwan, a quantum computing specialist Mira had tried to hire at Quantum Nexus before Parker shot down the unnecessary expense. Rounding out the team were faces both familiar and new, all exceptional, all drawn to the promise of working on something truly groundbreaking. And there, sitting quietly at the far end of the table, was Rishi, her former team lead from Quantum Nexus, who had finally answered her recruitment message after weeks of silence. As Mira entered, the room fell quiet, all eyes turning to her, with expressions ranging from admiration to curiosity to barely contained excitement. Welcome to Project Renaissance, she began, activating the holographic display in the center of the conference table. Neurosphere's core architecture appeared, rotating slowly in 3 dimensions, more elegant and complete than the version she'd left behind at Quantum Nexus. This is where we start. Where we go next is limited only by our collective imagination. For the next hour, she outlined her vision, not just for expanding Neurosphere's capabilities, but for applying its revolutionary approach to problems previously considered unsolvable. Climate prediction models that could account for chaotic variables. Medical diagnostic systems that could recognize patterns across seemingly unrelated symptoms. Creative problem-solving tools that could help address the most pressing challenges facing humanity. The energy in the room was palpable, a current of intellectual excitement that reminded Mira why she'd fallen in love with AI in the first place, not for stock options or corporate advancement, but for the pure joy of creating something that could change the world. As the meeting broke up into smaller discussion groups, Rishi approached her cautiously. Got a minute? They found a quiet corner of the building's atrium, sitting beside a small fountain that provided both soothing background noise and privacy from curious ears. I owe you an apology, Rishi began, his usual confidence replaced with genuine remorse. I should have spoken up when Parker fired you. We all should have. Mira studied her former colleague's face. Why didn't you? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Fear, mostly. Parker had been building a case against anyone he saw as aligned with the old guard. The day before your firing, he told me privately that I was on thin ice. So you protected yourself, Mira observed, not accusingly but matter-of-factly. I did. And I've hated myself for it every day since. He met her eyes directly. But that's not why I'm here, Mira. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm here because what you're building matters, and I want to help make it real. She considered this, weighing his obvious regret against her need for a team she could trust implicitly. What happened after I left? Chaos, Rishi said simply. Parker tried to pretend everything was under control, but the system kept rejecting every change we attempted. We couldn't access half the architecture without your authentication protocols. The Axiom Partners demo was a complete disaster, nothing worked, and their CTO left halfway through. And the others? The team? Most have already left. Those who haven't are updating their resumes. The company's imploding, Mira. There are rumors of layoffs, possibly even bankruptcy if they can't deliver something to replace Neurosphere. He hesitated. There's something else you should know. They're preparing a lawsuit against you. Mira raised an eyebrow. On what grounds? My ownership of Neurosphere was explicitly documented in my employment contract. They're claiming you deliberately sabotaged their systems before leaving, that you inserted code specifically designed to fail once you were gone. She laughed, genuinely amused. I didn't have to sabotage anything. The system was designed to require proper authentication. For security reasons. If they'd bothered to follow standard protocols instead of revoking my access in a fit of corporate theatrics, there wouldn't have been a problem. That's essentially what their own security team told them, but Parker wouldn't listen. Now that he's gone, the board is trying to salvage what they can, including their reputation. Mira absorbed this information, feeling a complex mixture of vindication and weariness. Let them try. The truth is documented in every line of code I wrote. Rishi nodded, relieved. So, are we good? Can I stay? She studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. Professional fresh start. The past stays in the past, but no more silence when something's wrong. That's my only condition. Deal. He extended his hand, which she shook firmly. As they walked back to join the others, Mira's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. Normally she would have let it go to voicemail, but something, intuition, perhaps, made her answer. Mira Chen. Ms. Chen, this is Alan Torres, chairman of Quantum Nexus. The voice was measured, authoritative, but lacking Parker's aggressive self-importance. Thank you for taking my call. I've been trying to reach you through proper channels. Mira glanced at Rishi, who recognized the name and raised his eyebrows in surprise. What can I do for you, Mr. Torres? I'd like to meet. Not to negotiate, I understand your algorithm belongs to Neurotech now, but to discuss a more amicable resolution to our current situation. What situation is that, exactly? Mira asked, keeping her voice neutral. The one where our company is facing potential bankruptcy because we foolishly allowed Parker Mitchell to alienate our most valuable asset, you. The blunt admission was unexpected. We've made mistakes, Ms. Chen. Serious ones. I'd like the opportunity to acknowledge them properly and discuss how we might move forward. Mira considered declining but found herself curious about what this olive branch might entail. When and where? Tomorrow, noon. There's a private dining room at Lumiere that offers appropriate discretion. Just you and me, no lawyers, no PR people. I'll be there, she said after a moment's consideration. But I make no promises about the outcome. That's all I can ask. Thank you, Ms. Chen. After ending the call, she turned to find Rishi watching her with a mixture of concern and curiosity. The chairman himself, huh? They must be truly desperate. Apparently. Mira pocketed her phone. But that's tomorrow's problem. Today, we have a renaissance to plan. The rest of the day passed in a blur of productive energy as the team began mapping out Project Renaissance's architecture. Unlike at Quantum Nexus, where innovation had been constrained by quarterly targets and investor expectations, here the focus was purely on pushing boundaries, technical, conceptual, even philosophical. By evening, as the California sunset painted the sky in gradient shades of orange and purple, Mira found herself alone in her new office, reviewing the day's progress with quiet satisfaction. A gentle knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Dr. Chandra entered, carrying 2 cups of tea. "I thought you might need this. You've been going nonstop since this morning." Mira accepted the cup gratefully. Old habits. At Quantum, if I slowed down, resources would get reallocated to whatever shiny object had caught Parker's attention that week. Dr. Chandra settled into a chair across from her. "That environment forged you into something remarkable. You know, not everyone could have done what you did, protected your work so completely while still appearing to be a good corporate soldier." "It wasn't a strategy," Mira admitted. "Just survival instinct. I always knew, on some level, that my time there was limited." Parker made it clear from his first day that he saw the old guard, which somehow included me at 32, as obstacles to his vision. His loss, our gain. Dr. Chandra sipped her tea thoughtfully. "The work you outlined today. It's ambitious. Revolutionary, even. But I noticed something interesting about your approach." "What's that?" "You're not designing these systems to replace human insight. You're creating tools that enhance it, that work symbiotically with human creativity and intuition." She smiled over the rim of her cup. "That's much harder, and much more valuable, than the typical Silicon Valley approach of trying to eliminate the human element entirely." Mira hadn't consciously articulated this philosophy, but hearing it spoken aloud, she recognized its truth. Machines are excellent at certain types of cognition, but there's something unique about human creativity, the ability to make intuitive leaps, to connect seemingly unrelated concepts. Exactly. And your algorithm somehow bridges that gap better than anything I've seen in 30 years of research. Dr. Chandra set down her cup. "Which is why I'm not surprised Quantum Nexus is falling apart without you. They didn't just lose an algorithm, they lost the mind that understood how to apply it meaningfully." The conversation shifted to technical challenges, but Dr. Chandra's observation lingered in Mira's thoughts long after the older woman had left. There was something powerful in that recognition, that her value wasn't just in the code she wrote but in her unique understanding of how to deploy it. The next morning, Mira dressed with particular care for her meeting with Alan Torres. Not to impress, but to armor herself against whatever strategy Quantum Nexus's chairman might employ. A structured blazer in deep teal, silver earrings that had been a gift from her grandmother, and the quiet confidence that came from knowing she held all the cards. As her car approached Lumiere, a discreet restaurant favored by Silicon Valley power players for sensitive conversations, she noticed a small group of reporters gathered near the entrance. Someone had leaked the meeting, probably intentionally. Though whether from Quantum's side or Neuroteca's was unclear. She instructed her driver to use the restaurant's private entrance, avoiding the impromptu press gauntlet. Inside, a host escorted her to a secluded dining room where Alan Torres was already waiting. He stood as she entered, tall, silver-haired, with the weathered confidence of someone who had built and sold 3 tech companies before joining Quantum Nexus's board. Not at all the enemy she had mentally prepared for. "Ms. Chen. Thank you for coming." He extended his hand, which she shook briefly before taking her seat. "I've ordered a selection of appetizers, but please feel free to request anything else." "I'm not here for the cuisine, Mr. Torres," Mira replied, keeping her tone professional but cool. "You mentioned an amicable resolution. I'm curious what that might entail, given the circumstances." He nodded, accepting her directness. "Fair enough. I'll be equally direct. Quantum Nexus made a catastrophic error in how we handled your termination and the intellectual property you developed. Parker Mitchell acted without board approval or proper legal review, and we failed in our oversight responsibilities." The frank admission was unexpected. Mira maintained her composed expression, waiting for him to continue. "The consequences of that error are now clear," Torres went on. "Without Neurosphere, without you, our AI division is essentially non-functional. The Axiom Partners contract, which represented nearly 30% of our projected annual revenue, has been cancelled. Our stock has dropped 43% in 3 weeks, and we're facing a shareholder class action lawsuit." "That sounds like a significant challenge," Mira observed neutrally. But I'm not clear on how it involves me at this point. My algorithm now belongs to Neurotech. Yes, it does. Torres nodded. And we're not contesting that ownership. What I'm proposing is something different. He slid a folder across the table. A public statement acknowledging your role as Neurosphere's creator and the circumstances of your departure. A formal apology from Quantum Nexus for how you were treated. And a new partnership between our companies, with you as the bridge. Mira opened the folder, scanning the draft statement with carefully concealed surprise. It was comprehensive, unambiguous in its admission of wrongdoing, and clearly designed to restore her professional reputation while giving Quantum Nexus a path forward. A partnership, she repeated. What exactly would that entail? Neurotech has exclusive rights to Neurosphere. We accept that. But there are applications we've developed that could be enhanced by your algorithm, applications in fields Neurotech hasn't yet explored. We're proposing a collaborative venture where both companies benefit from shared innovation, with appropriate compensation and recognition for all parties involved. It was a clever solution, one that would allow Quantum Nexus to salvage something from the wreckage while acknowledging Neurotech's ownership and Mira's central role. Not a groveling capitulation, but a pragmatic business proposal with the added benefit of public vindication. And if I'm not interested? Mira asked, keeping her cards close. Torres met her gaze evenly. Then we proceed with our current contingency plans, which are significantly less favorable for all involved. Quantum Nexus will likely downsize dramatically, possibly relocate or restructure entirely. Dozens of talented engineers, your former colleagues, will lose their positions. And instead of potential collaboration, our companies will remain competitors, with all the inefficiency that entails. He wasn't threatening, he was simply stating facts. Mira appreciated the honesty, even as she recognized the strategy behind it. Appeal to her sense of responsibility for her former team, while offering a business case that made rational sense. I'll need to discuss this with Julia and our board, she said finally. This isn't just my decision to make. Of course. I would expect nothing less. Torres handed her a business card with his private number. Take whatever time you need. But I hope you'll consider the potential benefits of turning this unfortunate situation into an opportunity for genuine innovation. As they finished the meal with professional small talk about industry trends and mutual connections, Mira found herself reassessing Alan Torres. Unlike Parker, who had viewed her as a resource to be exploited and then discarded, Torres seemed to genuinely recognize her value, both as Neurosphere's creator and as a potential partner. When they parted, the waiting reporters had multiplied, forcing both Mira and Torres to navigate a gauntlet of shouted questions. Mr. Torres? Is Quantum Nexus trying to buy back Neurosphere? Ms. Chen? Do you feel vindicated by Parker Mitchell's removal? Is there a settlement in the works? Mira kept walking, offering only a polite, no comment, as she reached her car. Torres, more practiced in handling the press, provided a brief, diplomatic statement about exploring positive paths forward, before disappearing into his own vehicle. Back at Neurotech, Mira went straight to Julia's office, finding the CEO already aware of the meeting thanks to the swirling media coverage. So, Julia said as Mira settled into a chair across from her desk, did they offer you the company on a silver platter, or just Parker's head on a pike? Mira smiled despite herself. Neither. They're proposing a partnership, shared development of applications using Neurosphere, with full acknowledgement of their mistakes and my ownership of the original algorithm. She slid Torres's proposal across the desk. Julia scanned it quickly, her expression shifting from skepticism to thoughtful consideration. Interesting approach. Not what I expected. She looked up. What do you think? I think it's worth considering, Mira admitted. Not for Quantum Nexus's sake, but for the potential applications. They've developed some promising implementations. In medical diagnostics and climate modeling, areas where Neurosphere could make a significant difference. Julia leaned back in her chair, studying Mira carefully. And the public vindication doesn't factor into your thinking at all? I won't pretend it isn't satisfying, Mira acknowledged. But that's not a business reason to pursue this. No. But it is a human one. Julia tapped the folder thoughtfully. Sometimes doing the right thing for the wrong reason still leads to the right outcome. And sometimes personal satisfaction and strategic business interests align perfectly. So, you think we should consider it? I think, Julia said carefully, that you've earned the right to shape this decision. If you believe there's value in the partnership, I'll support exploring it. If you prefer to let Quantum Nexus sink under the weight of its own mistakes, I'll support that too. The level of trust implied in that statement was humbling. At Quantum Nexus, Mira had fought for even the smallest degree of autonomy over her own creation. Here, she was being handed the authority to make decisions that would affect both companies' futures. I'll need to discuss it with the team, she said finally. Especially Rishi and the others who came from Quantum. They should have a voice in this. Julia nodded approvingly. Leadership suits you, Mira. Gather their input, then we'll talk again. The team meeting that afternoon was more heated than Mira had anticipated. Opinions split almost evenly between those who saw the strategic value in collaboration and those who viewed any partnership with Quantum Nexus as a betrayal of principle. They fired you in front of everyone, Leo argued passionately. They tried to steal your work. And now that they're drowning, they want us to throw them a lifeline? Let them sink. It's not about saving Quantum Nexus, Rishi countered. It's about the applications they've developed, applications that could help people if combined with Neurosphere's capabilities. Dr. Chandra, who had remained silent throughout most of the debate, finally spoke. Perhaps we're approaching this from the wrong angle. This isn't about punishment or redemption. It's about what serves the greater purpose of our work. All eyes turned to her as she continued. Mira, you designed Neurosphere to solve problems that matter, to address challenges facing humanity. If Quantum Nexus has developed applications that advance that goal, isn't collaboration the most direct path to realizing your vision? The room fell silent as the team considered this perspective. What if, Mira suggested slowly, we structure the partnership around specific projects rather than a general collaboration? We could start with the medical diagnostic system they've been developing, an area where immediate impact on human lives is possible. The idea gained traction, with even the most skeptical team members acknowledging the potential benefits of a carefully limited partnership. By the end of the meeting, a consensus had emerged. They would propose a modified version of Torres's offer, focused on collaborative development of applications with clear humanitarian value. As the team dispersed, Dr. Chandra lingered behind. You know, she said quietly, there's something poetic about this turn of events. They discarded you, thinking they could simply appropriate your work. Now they need you, not just your algorithm, but your insight, your vision. Mira smiled. Not revenge, but something better. Exactly. Dr. Chandra squeezed her shoulder gently. The best response to being undervalued is to create something so valuable they can't ignore it. You've done that, and more. Later that evening, as the California sunset painted Neuroteca's glass walls in shades of amber and gold, Mira stood at the window of her new office, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. 3 weeks ago, she had sat motionless in a conference room, publicly humiliated by a man who had never understood her value. Now she stood at the center of a revolution she was building on her own terms, with the power to extend mercy to the very company that had discarded her. Not out of weakness, but from a position of strength. Not forgiveness, but strategic vision. Not revenge, but renaissance. She picked up her phone and dialed Alan Torres's number. Mr. Torres? This is Mira Chen. I'd like to discuss a modified version of your proposal. The call lasted over an hour, with Torres agreeing to every condition Mira outlined. By the time she hung up, the framework for a new kind of collaboration had been established, one where her leadership and vision would never again be questioned. Her phone buzzed with a text from Julia. Decision made? Mira typed back, yes. Moving forward with a modified partnership. Focused on medical applications first. Full creative control remains with us. Julia's response came immediately, proud of you. Not everyone can transform humiliation into triumph without becoming what they fought against. Mira smiled at the screen, then set her phone aside and returned to the window. The last light of day was fading, giving way to the twinkling constellation of Silicon Valley at night, thousands of minds working on the next big thing, the next revolution, the next disruption. But few would accomplish what she had, reclaiming not just her algorithm, but her power. Not just her creation, but her future. And in the process, transforming a moment of professional crisis into the catalyst for something far greater than revenge, true innovation, driven by vision rather than ego. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new horizons to explore. But tonight, in the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had charted her own course through the storm, Mira Chen allowed herself to simply be still and acknowledge how far she had come. Not just $10 million richer, but immeasurably wealthier in the currency that truly mattered, the freedom to create on her own terms, valued for exactly who she was. 6 months later, Mira stood on a stage at the International AI Summit, bathed in the blue glow of spotlights as an audience of 3,000 industry leaders, engineers, and investors watched in rapt attention. Behind her, a massive screen displayed a visualization of Neurosphere's neural pathways, elegant, complex, alive with possibility. The breakthrough wasn't in processing power, she explained, her voice calm but energized. It was in reimagining how algorithms learn. Instead of forcing machine learning into rigid frameworks that mimic traditional coding structures, Neurosphere draws inspiration from how human intuition actually works, making creative leaps between seemingly unconnected data points. She clicked to the next slide, showing real-time results from the medical diagnostic application jointly developed by Neurotech and Quantum Nexus. This system identified patterns across patient data that human doctors missed, subtle correlations between seemingly unrelated symptoms that led to early diagnosis of rare conditions. Not replacing human expertise, but enhancing it. The audience was silent, absorbing the implications. In the front row, Julia Wong nodded encouragingly. Beside her sat Alan Torres, his expression a mixture of admiration and the lingering awareness of how close his company had come to losing everything. But today, I'm announcing something new, Mira continued. Project Renaissance is moving beyond theoretical applications into real-world implementation. Starting next month, 5 major research hospitals will begin using our diagnostic system, with the goal of saving lives that might otherwise be lost to rare and complex conditions. Applause rippled through the hall, not the performative enthusiasm of a typical tech conference, but the genuine appreciation of an industry recognizing true innovation. None of this happened in isolation, Mira acknowledged. It required the combined expertise of teams from both Neurotech and Quantum Nexus, working collaboratively rather than competitively. Her gaze briefly met Torres's. Sometimes the greatest breakthroughs emerge from our greatest challenges, if we have the courage to transform setbacks into stepping stones. As she concluded her presentation to a standing ovation, Mira felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with validation from the audience. The journey from public humiliation to public triumph had shaped her in ways she was only beginning to understand, not hardening her, as some might expect, but deepening her commitment to creating technology that truly mattered. Backstage, after fielding questions from reporters and accepting congratulations from colleagues, she found a moment of quiet in the preparation room. Dr. Chandra appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of tea. Impressive presentation, the older woman said, handing Mira a cup. Though I noticed you left out the more dramatic elements of the story. No mention of being fired in front of your team, no references to Parker Mitchell's spectacular downfall. Mira smiled. Those details make for good gossip, but they're not what matters about Neurosphere. No, Dr. Chandra agreed, settling into a chair beside her. But they are part of what makes your journey remarkable. Not many people could have transformed that kind of public humiliation into this level of success without becoming bitter or vengeful in the process. I had good advisors, Mira acknowledged, nodding gratefully to her mentor. And a clear sense of what I wanted to build, not just what I wanted to prove. Speaking of building, Dr. Chandra said, pulling up a message on her tablet, the initial results from the climate modeling project just came in. The algorithm is already identifying weather pattern correlations that the standard models missed. The research team is calling it a breakthrough. Mira leaned forward to study the data, her focus immediately shifting from the conference's hoopla to the work that truly energized her. This was the real victory, not the accolades or the vindication, but seeing her creation make a tangible difference in addressing humanity's most pressing challenges. The tablet pinged with another message. Investor reaction to your announcement is enthusiastic, Dr. Chandra noted with characteristic understatement. Neurotech stock is up 12% already. And Quantum? Mira asked, curious. Despite herself. Up 8%. Your generosity in acknowledging their contribution didn't go unnoticed. Dr. Chandra studied her thoughtfully. You could have destroyed them, you know. After what happened, no one would have blamed you for walking away and letting them collapse. Mira sipped her tea, considering this. Revenge would have been easier, she admitted. But also smaller. Limited. This partnership has pushed both companies to innovate in ways neither could have achieved alone. And made you considerably wealthier in the process, Dr. Chandra added with a raised eyebrow. The latest valuation of your equity stake is rather impressive. Mira laughed softly. A nice side effect, but not the point. She set down her cup. When Parker fired me, he thought he was removing an obstacle to his vision. What he actually did was free me to pursue a much larger one. A gentle knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Julia Wong entered, followed by a small delegation of hospital administrators eager to discuss implementation details for the diagnostic system. Mira smoothly transitioned back into professional mode, answering questions and outlining next steps with the quiet confidence that had become her trademark. The medical professionals departed, visibly impressed, leaving Mira alone with Julia. The board is ecstatic, Julia reported. And the partnership with Quantum has opened doors with other potential collaborators who were previously hesitant to work with us. Good, Mira nodded. The more minds working on these problems, the better. Julia studied her thoughtfully. When we first acquired Neurosphere and brought you on board, I thought we were getting a brilliant algorithm and its creator. I didn't realize we were also getting a new vision for how technology could be developed and deployed. To be fair, I didn't fully realize it either, Mira admitted. Sometimes you don't know what you're capable of building until you're given the freedom to try. The conference center bustled around them as attendees moved between sessions, the air electric with ideas and possibilities. Through the window, Mira could see the San Francisco skyline gleaming in the midday sun, a city built on innovation, disruption, and second acts. "There's someone who wants to meet you," Julia said, interrupting her thoughts. "A potential partner. For the environmental applications we've been discussing. She's quite influential in climate science circles." Mira checked her watch. "I have that panel discussion in an hour. Plenty of time." "She's waiting in the VIP lounge." They made their way through the crowd, with Mira occasionally stopped by admirers and colleagues offering congratulations. The attention no longer made her uncomfortable. She had earned her place in this world through creation rather than self-promotion. In the private lounge, a striking woman in her 60s stood by the window, deep in conversation with Alan Torres. Dr. Eleanor Harrington, Mira realized with a jolt of surprise, the pioneering climate scientist whose work had inspired several aspects of Neurosphere's environmental applications. "Dr. Harrington," Julia made the introduction. "This is Mira Chen, the creator of Neurosphere and leader of Project Renaissance." "Ms. Chen." Dr. Harrington's handshake was firm, her gaze direct and evaluating. "Your presentation was illuminating. I've been following your work with great interest." "I'm honored," Mira replied sincerely. "Your research on complex adaptive systems in climate modeling was actually a significant influence on how I approached certain aspects of the algorithm." Dr. Harrington's eyes lit up, and they quickly fell into an intense technical discussion that left the others in the room watching with bemused expressions. Two brilliant minds recognizing each other, speaking a language few others fully understood. "We've been trying to model these interactions for years," Dr. Harrington explained, sketching a diagram on a napkin. "The variables are simply too numerous and interconnected for traditional approaches." "That's exactly the type of problem Neurosphere was designed to address," Mira replied, adding to the impromptu sketch. "The intuitive leap function could potentially identify patterns that have been invisible in your current models." Torres, watching this exchange with interest, caught Julia's eye and nodded slightly. This was the magic they had both recognized in Mira, not just her technical brilliance, but her ability to see connections and possibilities where others saw only complexity and limitation. The conversation expanded to include practical considerations of a potential collaboration, with Dr. Harrington growing increasingly enthusiastic about the possibilities. By the time they needed to leave for the panel discussion, the framework for a new partnership had been established, one that could potentially transform humanity's approach to climate science. As they walked to the main hall, Torres fell into step beside Mira. "That was impressive," he observed. "Dr. Harrington is notoriously skeptical of AI solutions. She's rejected partnership offers from every major tech company. Because most of them are trying to replace human expertise rather than enhance it," Mira replied. "That's never been my approach." Torres nodded thoughtfully. When I first reached out to you after everything that happened, I was primarily motivated by trying to save Quantum Nexus. I saw the partnership as damage control." "And now?" Mira asked, curious. "Now I see it was the best thing that could have happened to both our companies." He smiled ruefully. "Sometimes being forced to rethink everything is the only way to break through to something better." The panel discussion, AI ethics and real-world applications, was already filling with attendees as they arrived. Mira took her place at the table alongside 5 other industry leaders, including the CTO of a major tech giant who had once dismissed her ideas as academically interesting but commercially impractical. The moderator began by asking each panelist to define what ethical AI meant to them. When Mira's turn came, she leaned slightly toward the microphone. "Ethics isn't an add-on feature," she said. "It's not something you bolt onto an algorithm after it's built. It needs to be woven into the very architecture of the system, informing every design decision from the beginning. At Project Renaissance, we ask not just can we build this? But should we build this, and if so, how can we ensure it enhances human capability rather than diminishing it?" The audience's response was enthusiastic, but Mira noticed the tech giant's CTO shifting uncomfortably. These weren't just abstract principles for her, they were the foundation of everything she'd built since leaving Quantum Nexus. As the discussion progressed, touching on issues of bias, transparency, and accountability, Mira found herself repeatedly returning to a central theme: technology should serve humanity's highest aspirations, not just its immediate desires or corporate profit motives. The most powerful algorithms aren't the ones that process data fastest, she explained during a spirited exchange about AI's future. They're the ones that help us see possibilities we couldn't imagine on our own, that augment human creativity and compassion rather than trying to replace them. In the audience, Dr. Chandra nodded approvingly. This philosophy had been at the core of Mira's approach from the beginning, even when she was fighting for resources and recognition at Quantum Nexus. The difference now was that she had the platform and power to truly implement it. After the panel, as attendees swarmed the stage with questions and business cards, Mira noticed a familiar face hovering at the edge of the crowd, Sasha, the legal specialist who had sat silently during her public firing 6 months earlier. Their eyes met briefly before Sasha looked away, clearly uncomfortable. Rather than ignore the moment, Mira excused herself from the group surrounding her and made her way to where her former colleague stood. Sasha, she greeted simply. I didn't know you were attending the conference. Last-minute decision, Sasha replied, not quite meeting Mira's gaze. I've been following Project Renaissance. The medical applications are remarkable. Thank you. Mira studied the other woman, noting the subtle signs of stress, the shadows under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. How are things at Quantum? Sasha hesitated. Different. Better, in some ways, since the restructuring. Torres has been more hands-on. Parker's replacement is actually interested in the technology, not just the stock price. She finally looked directly at Mira. I wanted to say I'm sorry for not speaking up that day. The apology was unexpected but not unwelcome. Mira considered how to respond, aware that this moment represented something larger than just a personal interaction. We all make choices based on the information and courage we have in the moment, she said finally. What matters is what we learn from those choices. I've learned a lot, Sasha admitted quietly. Watching you build something so meaningful after being treated so badly, it's been eye-opening. Good, Mira said, with genuine warmth. Use that insight. The tech world needs more people who understand the human impact of corporate decisions. As they parted, Mira felt a strange sense of closure, not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that the humiliation she had experienced had rippled outward, affecting others in ways that might ultimately lead to positive change. The rest of the conference passed in a blur of meetings, presentations, and unexpected connections. By the closing reception that evening, Mira was exhausted but exhilarated, her mind already racing with new possibilities sparked by the day's interactions. She found a quiet moment on the venue's rooftop terrace, gazing out at the city lights while nursing a single glass of champagne. The cool evening air was a welcome relief after the intensity of the day. There you are, Julia joined her at the railing. Hiding from your admirers? Mira smiled. Just taking a moment to process. It's been quite a day. Quite a 6 months, Julia corrected. From being fired in front of your team to becoming the most sought-after voice in AI ethics and innovation. Not to mention turning a $10 million acquisition into a valuation that's now approaching $1 billion. The numbers were still somewhat unreal to Mira. Her equity stake in Neurotech, combined with the royalties from Neurosphere's applications, had made her wealthy beyond anything she had imagined when building the algorithm in her apartment 3 years earlier. The money is nice, she acknowledged. But it's the impact that matters. Seeing the medical diagnostic system actually saving lives, knowing the climate models might help address the biggest challenge humanity faces, that's the real validation. Julia nodded, understanding perfectly. Which is exactly why you've been so successful. Most people in this industry are building toward an exit or an acquisition. You've always been building toward a better world. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the city below. Then Julia spoke again, her tone more serious. The board met this morning. We want to create a new division, Renaissance Technologies, with you as CEO. Full autonomy, dedicated resources, and a mandate to pursue the applications that matter most to you. Mira turned to her in surprise. CEO? Julia, I'm a developer, not an executive. You're both, Julia replied firmly. What you've built goes far beyond code. You've created a vision for how technology can serve humanity, and you've assembled a team that can execute on that vision. That's what leadership is, Mira. The offer was unexpected but not entirely shocking. Mira had been functioning as a de facto executive for months, making strategic decisions that shaped not just Project Renaissance but Neurotech's overall direction. I'd need to think about it, she said finally. This isn't a decision to make on a rooftop after a glass of champagne. Julia laughed. Fair enough. But consider this, 6 months ago, Parker Mitchell thought he was ending your career. Now, you're being offered the chance to lead a division that could transform multiple industries. If that's not the ultimate vindication, I don't know what is. As they rejoined the reception, Mira found herself approached by a young woman, barely out of college, judging by her nervous energy and the first-time attendee badge clipped to her lanyard. Miss Chen, the young woman began hesitantly. I'm sorry to bother you, but your keynote this morning was incredible. I'm a graduate student in AI ethics, and your approach to augmenting human capability rather than replacing it is exactly what drew me to the field. Thank you, Mira replied, genuinely touched. What's your focus area? The question opened a floodgate of enthusiasm as the student described her research into algorithmic bias in healthcare applications, precisely the issue Project Renaissance had been working to address in their diagnostic system. Have you considered where you want to work after graduation? Mira asked when the young woman paused for breath. Honestly, somewhere like Project Renaissance would be a dream, she admitted. But those positions are impossibly competitive. Mira smiled. Send me your research. We're expanding the team, and we need people who understand both the technical and ethical dimensions of what we're building. The young woman's expression of shocked delight was a reminder of how recently Mira herself had been fighting for recognition and opportunity. Now she had the power to open doors for others whose brilliance might otherwise be overlooked or undervalued. As the evening wound down, Mira found herself in a final conversation with Alan Torres, both of them reflecting on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment of unexpected collaboration. I saw Parker Mitchell is launching a startup, Torres mentioned. Something in the crypto space, I believe. Mira shrugged, genuinely uninterested. I wish him well. And surprisingly, she meant it. Parker had become irrelevant to her story, a catalyst for change rather than an ongoing antagonist. You're a better person than most, Torres observed. Many in your position would still be celebrating his downfall. That would require caring about his trajectory, Mira replied. I'm too focused on building something meaningful to waste energy on grudges. Torres nodded, understanding. The partnership between our companies has exceeded all expectations. The board is considering a formal merger proposal, bringing Neurotech and Quantum Nexus together under a single umbrella, with Renaissance Technologies as the flagship division. The news wasn't entirely unexpected. The collaboration had been moving in this direction for months, but the implications were significant. A merger would consolidate resources, eliminate redundancies, and potentially accelerate the development of applications that could make a real difference in the world. Interesting, Mira said carefully. Though I imagine there would be regulatory hurdles. Manageable ones, Torres assured her. The more pressing question is leadership. Julia has indicated she might be ready for a new challenge. The board is unanimously interested in you as a potential CEO for the combined entity. This was more surprising. CEO of a merged Neurotech Quantum Nexus would make Mira one of the most powerful executives in Silicon Valley, a remarkable trajectory for someone who, just 6 months earlier, had been escorted from Quantum's offices with her personal belongings in a box. That's a significant leap, she said, choosing her words carefully. Torres smiled. No more significant than creating an algorithm. That's transforming multiple industries, or turning a public firing into a $10 million opportunity. You've already proven you can transform setbacks into stepping stones. The question is whether you want to take this particular step. Mira gazed out at the city lights, considering the strange symmetry of the situation. The company that had discarded her was now essentially offering itself back to her, not out of charity or apology, but because her vision and leadership had proven more valuable than anyone had realized. I'll think about it, she said finally. But whatever happens with the corporate structure, my priority remains the work itself, building technology that enhances human potential rather than diminishing it. I would expect nothing less, Torres replied with genuine respect. Later that night, as Mira's car wound through the hills toward her home, a modest but beautiful space overlooking the bay, purchased with the first installment of her Neurosphere royalties, she found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she had sat motionless in a conference room, maintaining her composure while Parker Mitchell publicly dismantled her career. Tonight, she had stood on stage as one of the most respected voices in artificial intelligence, with 2 major companies essentially competing for her leadership. The contrast was stark, but the through line was clear: her unwavering commitment to creating technology that mattered, her refusal to let someone else's limited vision define her worth, and her ability to transform humiliation into opportunity without losing her humanity in the process. As the car pulled into her driveway, Mira's phone pinged with a message from Dr. Chandra. Saw the merger rumors. Whatever you decide, remember why you built Neurosphere in the first place. The platform changes, the purpose shouldn't. Mira smiled, grateful for the reminder. Whether as a division head, a potential CEO, or simply the creator of an algorithm that was changing the world, her North Star remained the same: building technology that enhanced human capability, creativity, and compassion. The public humiliation that Parker had intended as her end had instead become her beginning. The algorithm he had tried to control was now transforming industries in ways he had never imagined. And Mira Chen, once dismissed as a relic of outdated programming methods, was now defining the future of artificial intelligence. Not through revenge or bitterness, but through the much more powerful act of creation. Not by tearing others down, but by building something so valuable that the world had no choice but to recognize its worth, and hers. As she entered her home, the lights automatically adjusting to her presence, Mira felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey, even the painful parts. Every step, even the humiliation of that conference room, had led her here, to a place where she could create on her own terms, valued for exactly who she was and what she built. The universe, it seemed, had a remarkable way of redistributing talent to where it belonged. And sometimes, the greatest catalyst for that redistribution was someone foolish enough to discard what they didn't understand. In the quiet of her home, overlooking the twinkling lights of the bay, Mira Chen allowed herself a moment of pure, uncomplicated satisfaction. Not just for the $10 million that had validated her work, but for the far more valuable currency she had earned: the freedom to create something that mattered, on her own terms, without compromise. That, more than any corporate title or financial windfall, was the true measure of her triumph. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.